Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Shasta County Board of Supervisors for Tuesday, March 5th, 2012. Thank you for being with us this morning. We appreciate your attendance. The first order of the agenda is the invocation by Pastor Eric Madsen, Cottonwood Bible Baptist Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Will you join us by standing, please? And we'll just stand here for a while, I guess. All right. Would you mind leading us in prayer, Supervisor
Happy
Barr?
to. Father, thank you so much for this awesome day. We're grateful for another wonderful day in Shasta County and the opportunity to meet together as a community. Father, we ask your blessing upon what we share. We ask that all things that are spoken and heard today may be honorable to you. Father, continue to watch over those in need within our community. We especially appreciate your care for those who need the most, Father. We ask that we're able to help wherever we can. Father, bless this time together. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
No.
Please join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Supervisor Barr. Next item on our agenda is the public comment period. Comments should be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the board. Action or board discussion cannot be taken on open time matters, other than to receive the comments and, if deemed necessary, to refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up and/or to schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. We have 3 requests to speak this morning. The first presenter will be Ms. Doreen Bradshaw of the Shasta Health Assessment Redesign Collaborative. Ms. Bradshaw, good morning.
Good morning, Supervisor Kehoe and the Board of Supervisors. I'm here today as a member of the Shasta Health Assessment Redesign Collaborative and would like to provide you an update on the status of the implementation of managed care for our Medi-Cal population. Last June, we were here and the board adopted a county resolution supporting the implementation through a county organized health system, or a COS, and by working with the Partnership Health Plan of California. Support for the COS model was based on the performance. It performs the best out of all the Medi-Cal managed care models. It has a strong focus on primary care and prevention. It's the model that patients prefer the most, and it is the best model for rural communities. Support for Partnership Health Plan was based on their commitment. They're a nonprofit and their commitment to the Medi-Cal population, their demonstrated success and significant experience, and their commitment to working with Shasta County and 6 other Northern California counties, their very low administrative costs, and their customer service. The decision by the Department of Healthcare Services was delayed, and we were back here in January requesting your continued support for the COS model and Partnership Health Plan of California. I'm very pleased to announce that last week we found out our request to be carved out of the state's request for application was honored. And we will be moving forward with implementing Medi-Cal managed care through a COS model and working with Partnership Health Plan. The 7 counties, I just want to remind you, are Del Norte, Humboldt, Lassen, Modoc, Shasta, Siskiyou, and Trinity. And so we're going to be all working together to do this, and we were carved out of this RFA. On behalf of the Shasta Health Assessment and Redesign Collaborative, I would like to express our utmost gratitude to the Shasta County Board of Supervisors, and specifically to Supervisor Kehoe on this very, very important health initiative for our community. The unified voice of clinics, hospitals, county departments, medical societies, and others, as well as County Board of Supervisor resolutions from all 7 counties, had a significant impact on our ability to move forward. The bipartisan support of our legislators and the advocacy of Assembly Members Chesborough, Dolly, and Nielsen at the time were also very instrumental in moving forward. What an incredible demonstration of collaboration and a great win for these rural communities in Northern California. But now the hard work is before us. That was the easy stuff. The state will try to hold us to a very tight timeline, implementation, 90 days, June 1st. So because we are so organized and have worked together so collaboratively, I believe we'll be able to move aggressively towards meeting this goal. We may not be totally there, but we're going to be right there. Yesterday, we met with Partnership Health Plan to begin the planning process, so they're very engaged, and we are reaching out to all of our other counties to get them organized and ready to go and identify key folks to participate in the planning process. We'll keep you updated as we make continued progress. We'll be back here during the planning process, and I just want to really thank you for your support. It was an incredible win for our community.
Yes, it would be appropriate for us to show our appreciation to Ms. Bradshaw and her team.
It's a team effort.
Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. I think the accomplishment was a tribute to your efforts and the efforts of the team, and we thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ms. Ruth Angel. Ms. Angel. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ruth Angel with the Integrity Project, and you probably heard a lot about us in the past few weeks, and Supervisor Ball, you suggested that this is the appropriate place for us to really talk about the Integrity Project, but I only have 3 minutes, so I'd really like to get into the objectives of the Integrity Project and basically give you some idea of how we would like to move forward. Can't do a lot in 3 minutes, but I'll give you the best go I got. I'm not a professional speaker. One of our objectives is to open up the communication. While these meetings are at 9 o'clock on Tuesday, they are what has been sort of set in stone, and that's okay, and we don't want to change that. But what we want to do is open the communication between the public and each of you. So our hope is to, and we have already started, and basically bring the issues to you. We're going to get district folks together, district committees, define the issues in those districts, invite you to town halls in each of those districts, talk to you about how you can help us solve those problems in each of those districts, and then have you come back to your board and talk about what may be common problems between each of your districts and help each other, help us solve some of those problems. We hope to inspire change by bringing solutions to the table. And what comes to mind to me is the example in Shingletown. Last week or a couple weeks ago, I heard about a meeting where Sheriff Basinko had gone to the folks in Shingletown and said, look, you're losing your sheriff's deputy. And I, who am in District 2, thought to myself, oh my gosh, how does this impact this entire community? And this brought together our thoughts of creating these committees in each district because they affect all of us. When they start rationing officers to go up to Shingletown, they leave my one officer in Zone 2 or District 2 to go up to handle the problems in Shingletown, which is 45 minutes away. While I have a lot of confidence in Sheriff Basinko and our officers, I know that we will get the help we need in District 2, but it makes me uncomfortable, and it makes me feel like, okay, there's got to be a better way. So these district committees I thought were perfect examples of how we could bring these solutions to the table, and maybe with Sheriff Basinko dealing with AB 109 issues, the jail issues, getting a sheriff up in the Shingletown area, maybe we as a community can come together and say, look, we'll go to the college, we'll ask them to sponsor maybe a reserve program, a level 1 reserve program, where we can get people in each of these districts involved in some sort of reserve program. I haven't talked to Tom, I have no idea whether or not this is something that's viable, but we create reserves in each of these districts to kind of fill in the gap, especially at night, where we know we have the least coverage. So that's just a thought. We also want to encourage through these committees to allow younger people and people who work during the day and can't be here for 3 hours to get involved in their district, find out about, we hope, the exchange of information from our supervisors about the regional issues, about things that are going to affect us from the state. And basically, we want to just get involved. And I think that there's a better way, and this is not all about planning and permits. It's about engaging with you as supervisors and...
Thank you, Ms. Angel. Appreciate your presentation.
Sure. Thank you.
Our next...
Supervisor Chairman Kehoe, just in the way of informing the public, the Sheriff's Department is not rationing off officers. The resident in Shingletown was hired by another agency. The sheriff, of course, conducted interviews, has already put somebody in line for that as a resident deputy, and they're passing their background screening at this moment. In the meantime, he brought overtime staff in to prepare that. Town halls and communities like Shingletown and Cottonwood have already formed their own committees. Shingletown Activities Council, you'll want to connect with, as well as through the Cottonwood Community Center. They have a downtown improvement group. They do that. We hold meetings multiple times each year, twice in Cottonwood, once in Shingletown at the very least. So you might want to connect with those folks. But thank you, Sheriff, for your information as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Baugh. Our next speaker is Mr. Terry Raposa. Mr. Raposa. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
On top of the world.
That's it. That's the way to be. Anyway, I'm also with the Integrity Project, and one of the things we want to do is have a palatable situation to where we can all work together. That's the idea. There are some things where we're all restricted by law and things we have to adhere to do this. Now, one thing that we've done is a program called Support Rural America, and I bring this up because it shows how the people can work with agencies and how the people can work with their counties. Support Rural America supports all the sheriffs in counties. My wife and I work extensively with them. We do all the programs and everything for these events. What it does is it brings in the people to talk with the sheriffs. We have a panel of sheriffs. It's a great event. Every single one we've done has gone past our expectations with people by at least 30 to sometimes 50%, where we don't even have enough programs for people. So people do want to get engaged. Those counties are Siskiyou, Plumas, Tehama, Del Norte, Modoc, Shasta, Trinity, Mendocino, and also there is one particular thing I did want to bring up about that. In Josephine County, the sheriff up there, Gil Gilbertson, and the reason I'm bringing this up is to show you how everybody works together, and that's what we really need to do. Gil Gilbertson has had his staff cut by 70%. He was speaking at the sheriff's symposium we had in Mendocino County. He had to go back up at 4 o'clock and leave that particular symposium to go cover a graveyard shift. We want to make sure that our sheriff and that our law enforcement has the tools that they need. And there's a lot of things going on. There's all kinds of different lawsuits. There's a lot of money being spent. And what we want to do is I don't know why we can't bring speeding conclusions. And my last point is that agencies, our senators, our congressmen, you folks, we can all work together. For example, in Mrs. Giacomini's district, there's a major retailer that was going to be taken out of business. He had a problem because he had to take over the business from someone he had sold it to, so he received the business back. In receiving that business back, he had a tremendous problem costing thousands of dollars with a state agency. He couldn't get any compliance. He couldn't get questions answered. He couldn't get people to talk to them because there wasn't any cooperation. A phone call to Jim Nielsen, and Jim on a Sunday went ahead and called this gentleman. Guess what? 2 days later, after 6 months of fighting, he was able to resolve his issue with this particular agency. That's what we need to do here. And we need to have a situation where we're all working together to better Shasta County. That's what everybody wants. And that's really what the Integrity Project's about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raposa. Is there anyone else in the audience this morning that would like to address the Board of Supervisors? Thank you.
Supervisor Key, I'll just add one more informational item. I had also suggested to the Integrity Project that you supply the clerk with information. Anything that is distributed to her, about 10 copies, will go to all the supervisors, and that's a great way to reach us jointly in a community forum as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Baugh. We'll now go to the regular calendar, board matters. R1, Consider adopting a resolution which recognizes Shasta County's Employee of the Month for March 2013. The proposed resolution reads as follows. A resolution of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Shasta recognizing Linda Lohman, Personnel Assistant, Sheriff's Office, as the March 2013 Employee of the Month. Whereas the Shasta County Board of Supervisors has adopted the Shasta County Employee Recognition Program to identify exceptional employees who deserve to be recognized and honored for their contribution to the county service. Whereas such recognition is given to the employees meeting the criteria of the program, namely exceptional customer service, professionalism, high ethical standards, initiative, innovation, teamwork, productivity, and service as a role model for other public employees. And whereas the Shasta County Employee Recognition Committee has considered all nominations for the Shasta County Employee of the Month, now therefore be it resolved that Ms. Linda Lohman, Personnel Assistant, Sheriff's Office, is hereby named Shasta County Employee of the Month for March 2013. And be it further resolved that Ms. Lohman truly loves her job, and it shows in her work product, her positive demeanor, and her humor. She is an excellent role model for other county employees. Ms. Lohman is well deserving of the Employee of the Month recognition. Duly passed and adopted this 5th day of March 2013 by the Board of Supervisors of the County of Shasta by the following vote, and it's signed by David A. Keogh, Chairman, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. Is there a motion, please?
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Sheriff Pasenko. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Kehoe, members of the board, Tom Pasenko, Shasta County Sheriff. Thank you very much for approving this resolution. Ms. Lohman is a very professional and outgoing person for our personnel assistant. She assists not only our applicants, but our employees. She's responsible for testing, processing all the paperwork, working with our background investigators and members of my command staff for hiring. She is very positive and conducts herself in a very professional manner, and she consistently assures that policies and procedures are being followed during the hiring process. She's a very motivated, self-starting person, very much a team player, as you had identified earlier, and her productivity is amazing. She keeps all the moving parts moving along, working with us with the hiring procedure and working closely with support services in the personnel department. So I'd like to introduce Ms. Linda Lohman, my personnel assistant.
He's going to present to you first.
Okay.
Ms. Lohman, good morning. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors and all of our staff directors and the residents of Shasta County, it's a pleasure to present you with this plaque. Shasta County Employee of the Month, March 2013, Linda Lohman, Personnel Assistant, in recognition of your overall professionalism, commitment, and high personal standards in your service to the citizens of Shasta County, and this is signed by Supervisor Keogh, Modi, Giacomini, Chappelle, and Baugh. Congratulations. This is great. Now we also have some other gifts for you. We have a rosewood gift set. Shasta County is engraved on the pin and the gift box, and it's engraved with the Shasta County emblem. We have a DVD of this award presentation, and we have a $25 gift certificate donated by the Mid-Management Bargaining Unit to a local restaurant, a $25 gift certificate donated by the department head forum to Outback Restaurant, a $25 gift certificate donated by the Shasta County Employees Association, and a $40 gift certificate to a local restaurant donated by the Deputy Sheriff's Association. And we thank all of their donors in recognizing our Employee of the Month. Now, would you like to say a few words? Oh, that'd be great. All right, why don't I take this, and then we'll do some pictures, and you might want to introduce your family members if they're here.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. It's an honor to be recognized as the County Employee of the Month. I'd like to thank my supervisors and peers for all of their support and nomination. I thoroughly enjoy my position with the Sheriff's Office. It's been both challenging, rewarding, and sometimes rather entertaining. In our department, there are ranks, titles, chains of command. They all play a significant role. However, the line sometimes becomes blurred when the best laid plans fall through due to emergencies. But it's not uncommon to hear, "What can I do?" from my coworkers or even those of higher rank to help make it all work. It's clearly an example of working as a team. And thank you to those who I do work closely with on admin row, as we refer to it. Your support and encouragement is greatly appreciated. It makes coming to work every day worthwhile and enjoyable. Thank you. I have my fiance here, Tony, who is soon to be a Shasta County employee.
All right, now we're going to take some pictures if you'd like to come over here. Tom, right over in front of the dais. And I invite my colleagues to come down, please. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks. Our next item on the agenda is an very important item, and we're going to recognize some people that are doing a heck of a job for the residents of Shasta County by recognizing them as the Grand Jury Awareness Month in Shasta County. And we've invited Supervisor Giacomini to make this presentation. Pam?
Thank you, Chairman Kehoe. It is my pleasure to read this proclamation and to be able to make the motion. I have known many people over the years who have served on the grand jury, and it is worthy, it's hard work, and we really appreciate all that you do. So the proclamation is the Shasta County Board of Supervisors Proclamation Grand Jury Awareness Month, March 2013. Whereas grand juries are crucial components of California's judicial system, serving three important roles: overseeing and reporting on the efficiency, honesty, and impartiality of local governments and elected officials, determining whether criminal acts have been committed and if there's enough evidence to charge a person with that crime, and determining whether to accuse public officials of impropriety, and Whereas every county in California has a grand jury made up of citizens appointed by the county's superior court who dedicate their time for a full year to grand jury service. And whereas thanks to their commitment and hard work, grand jurors help ensure that local governments such as counties, cities, special districts, and school districts are operating legally and efficiently. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Shasta County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims March 2013 as Grand Jury Awareness Month in Shasta County, recognizing the contributions of the Shasta County Grand Jury and encouraging citizens to apply for grand jury service by contacting the Shasta County Superior Court or accessing the grand jury's website. This will be signed by David Kehoe, our chairman, on today's date, March 5th, 2013. So again, thank you for your service. I would so move that we accept the proclamation.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion of this important proclamation, motion? Please say aye. All those who approve?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Kehoe. I would like to invite Diana Sturgis up to make a short presentation, and then we will, hopefully she will introduce all the grand jurors that are present, which is wonderful that they came.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us be here today. And I'd like members of the present grand jury to stand up, and I'll introduce those that are here. And thank you. I'm looking around to see if we missed anybody. Present today is Sonia Sonny Spencer, Cheryl Tolliver, Ann Morningstar, Tom Vella Haas, Larry Johnson, Donald Olson, and Harry Tully. Thank you for being here with us today. And thank you for honoring the Shasta County Grand Jury today. I am here to tell you that the Shasta County Grand Jury is an excellent example of citizens doing their best to serve their local community. And I am personally very proud to have known and worked with them this year. This year's grand jury is made up of mostly retired individuals, including 4 teachers, an attorney, a school superintendent, a physician, state auditor, former regional director of EDD, a high-placed PG&E employee, insurance investigator, and several people who owned and ran their own businesses. Last Thursday, there were 25 college degrees represented among the 16 members of the grand jury meeting. These individuals tend to ask excellent questions. On an average for 1 year, these individuals have spent 10 to 20 hours per week learning about and interviewing many high-placed leaders in our county in order to write reports which will hopefully enlighten and aid you in doing a better job of leading and problem solving in our county. These are highly qualified people who have and are working hard to take a good look at the running of Shasta County and make suggestions that close loopholes. Even the best leaders need accountability. As you know, accountability in government helps leaders lead and come against dishonesty and lethargy. Accountability allows leaders to recognize potential problems at early stages rather than when it's too late to make positive changes. This lets the community feel that they really know what is going on in their area. Perhaps because the state of California is so big, the state legislature came up with the civil grand jury system. The hope was that these citizens could be the watchdog for the county and aid in defining areas in which new policy and procedures could help in governing. Shasta County is especially blessed to have a grand jury association with excellent leaders like David Yorton, Karen Jarr, Marcia Karansky, Ray Frisbee, David Plowman, Joyce Bianskis, and Dorothea Howerton, who are also represented here today. Many of these leaders are state grand jury trainers and have invested lots of heart and sweat to make our local grand jury able to function effectively. The Shasta Grand Jury Association is sponsoring an informational get-together at the community room at Reading City Hall on Thursday, March 14th at 3 p.m. We urge interested citizens in applying to serve on the Shasta County Grand Jury for the 2013-14 year. If you're interested, please come and hear the presentation. And finally, thank you, leaders, for being gracious and acting like you are happy when you are asked to come and talk to us. And when you're asked to supply detailed information. One of my favorite sayings comes from a plaque on the wall of a conference center. It said, "It's amazing what can be accomplished when you don't care who gets the credit." We hope that our tenure in the Shasta County Grand Jury will help every leader and employee feel like their investment in the welfare of this county was more than worth it. Thank you.
Here's the signed proclamation. Again, thank you very much, and thank you for all of your service.
Thank you, and I'd like the whole group to stand up again. We have a bunch of them here. Come on, the whole group.
All right.
Stand up.
Great.
You are great.
So we have a question, please. If folks want more information on what's going to happen on March 14th, who can they contact?
Go to our website. There's a link on our website.
Okay.
You may want to go back over here so that they'll get it on the TV and stuff.
And
You notice he's getting his chance to ask you a question to get even. That's what
It's good, and you guys ask good questions too. I've heard you. Keep it up. We like that good questioning. Go on the Shasta County website, and there'll be more information about the meeting on the 14th. But it'll be down at City Hall in the community room. So we'd love to see a lot of the people sitting in here today at that meeting.
good. Thank you. Oh,
Shasta County Grand Jury.org.
okay. And so thank you. What's going to happen at this meeting?
We're going to have a presentation by the Grand Jury Association. A lot of the members are there, so you can speak to them and hear not only what we do, but why we like to do it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Presentations R3. Receive an update and facilitate learning analysis on the Reading fire from Lassen Volcanic National Park Superintendent Darlene Coons and Lassen Volcanic National Park Fire Management Officer Eric Hensel. Good morning.
Good morning. 1 second here. Let's see if we can get some pictures up for you. Okay, got it. Good morning, everybody, and I really appreciate your time on your agenda again. This past summer, I came before you and promised that I would come back and talk a little bit more after the fire this summer, and that's what I plan to do today. So before we get started, I'm Darlene Kuntz. I'm the superintendent of Lassen Volcanic National Park, and here with me today, you talked about it, Eric Hensel. He's the fire management officer, and Lisa Wilkelock, she's the program assistant in my office here. In the second row, there's some other employees here from the park. They're playing incognito today, but we thought we'd identify them. So what I'd like to do today, and not take up too much time, but really try to open this up to questions, is I really quickly want to go just quickly over the Reading fire, talk about lessons learned from the review, touch on effects of the fire on the landscape. So when you go visit the park this summer, what you're going to see and expect. And then I want to talk about the tools we use to manage fuels and wildland fire across the landscape and make sure I open it up for questions for all of you. So just quickly, just to recap on the Reading fire. As you know of, on July 23rd last year, we had a thunderstorm that came through the area that had a number of lightning strikes. One of those lightning strikes ignited the Reading fire. From that point, at that point when it ignited the Reading fire, what we do is we did an assessment of fuel types it was in, what kind of containment we had potential of, what the weather was forecasted to be, what was going on in the communities, and all the resources that were available both locally and on a national and a regional level. At that point, we made the decision, or I made the decision, to manage that fire for multiple purposes or for resource benefits. The process of the decision process that that allowed me to do that was, first off, the fire management plan, which we follow at Shasta National Park, and that was a public process. And our fire management plan is also tiered off of the National Fire Policy. As you're aware of, on August 6th, the fire, which we had containment identified out throughout the fire, but the fire jumped the road and headed north. On August 22nd, the fire was considered contained at 28,000 acres at roughly $17 million. When the fire first started, it was kind of in an open canopy of red fir at about an elevation of 7,100 feet. So a review was conducted in September of this past year, and the review came out in late January. And there's a website up there. It's open to the public. Anybody can pull down or read the review. So what we had is we had an interagency team of firefighters from Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, Park Service come to the park and spend about a week. And what they did is they focused on lessons learned. They took a week and they talked with all the decision makers throughout that fire. And the whole purposes of the review was to explore, learn, and identify the lessons learned from the Reading fire. And the reason we want to do this is we really want to focus on the decisions were made, and also to look at the ways that we need to change behavior or the way we handle things to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again. You know, oftentimes we celebrate successes, but I think it's just as important to do lessons learned, and especially in situations like this, when we have unexpected or unintended outcomes of this. So the whole purpose of it is to take those lessons learned, incorporate them into the fire management program here at Lassen, and also, too, to share those lessons learned with our cooperators and the public and get feedback. So please, if anyone's interested, please go to that website. The whole review is on there if you haven't read it. The one thing I want to remind folks is our #1 priority when we're making any of these decisions to manage fuels across the landscape is firefighter and public safety. Lessons learned from and recommendations from the review that was done. What I want to do is just touch on it. There's a number of lessons learned and there's recommendations that we're implementing as we speak now within the fire program. It was broken down into four areas. Planning was one of them. And I'm just going to touch base on some of the lessons learned that really stuck out for me. And one of them was in our planning from very beginning, we planned, containment areas, where we can allow the fire to burn to, where would we put it out. But I think one of the things that came out really clear for all of us here is that we need to do better worst case scenario. We always knew that we did not want it to go past that main park road. So we need to do, in the future, we need to do more planning that really takes into effect worst case scenarios. If it's going to cross that park road, what is going to happen and what are we going to do? Fire behavior was another category that we looked at for lessons learned and recommendations. And I think what we learned here is there's a number of tools that we have in fire modeling and behavior and analyzing fire, fuels, long-term weather. I think that the other thing that came out of it is we really need to make sure that we're using all these tools, but more importantly, making connections between these tools and over time. Weather on July 23rd was completely different than weather was on August 6th. We all know that, and so we need to make sure that we're doing those analyses throughout that time frame in the planning part of it. Public information, lessons learned about there. One of the things we're going to do is, first off, as soon as we make that decision to manage a fire for multiple objectives, we're going to make sure that we get the press release out and the information out to the public and our agency and our cooperators, immediately, so folks knows what's on. We also have a number of mechanisms set up, like we have a blog on Facebook and Twitter, and we're going to try to start to begin to use those tools to make sure that people are aware of what's going on throughout a fire that we might have at the park. Management and coordination. Two things I'd like to touch on base here. We need to increase dialogue across agencies and administrative units, especially in the fire community. But more importantly, we need to do this both pre-season and post-season. And what I mean by pre-season is we have a number of projects laid out every summer in the fire program. What we may need to do is make sure that we get it out to the public and also to get it out to our cooperators. Here's our plan, here's our strategies for this upcoming fire season. And then I think it would be really good at post-season is to all of us to meet back together and say, okay, how did it go? And where do we want to go from here next year? The other thing, I think we need to additionally work closely with all cooperators, all agencies, state, local, to really look at how we can work cooperatively across this landscape where the fuel loads are so heavy. We really need to implement things so we have a more resilient forest out there to work with. The other thing I think we need to do is I think we need to work with the media, to work with the media so that they have really current and informative and correct information throughout an incident type like this. The other thing, too, I think we need to work with the media and other people that are talking about fire, whether it's blogs or it's online or it's in newspapers, to really talk about education and take the opportunities throughout the year to educate people about the conditions out here across this landscape that we're all working with, and a little bit more about our fire programs and how they work. You know, this isn't the issue. The fuels in this landscape here, and that fire is part of it, is not just a public lands issue. I think it's all of us. It's state, it's local, it's county, it's federal. The fuel loads out here are extraordinary, we all know that, and it's going to take us all working together to work through these. Now I'd like to turn it over to Eric for a second, and he's going to talk to you about, if you visit the park this summer, what you're going to see.
Thank you. Thank you, Darlene. Thank you, board. Like Darlene said, real quick, I know you guys have a real busy schedule, so real quick, I'm just going to kind of talk to you about what you're going to see, some of the effects of the fire. Here's just a general picture of kind of some of the mixed effects, the mosaic of the fire as it burned across the landscape. Here is a nice colorful map. It basically is your vegetative burn severity map. In simplistic terms, this basically tells you the impacts of the fire on the vegetation. Obviously the red color being high impacts, and then you all the way to the dark green color, which is your low to almost no impacts throughout the burn area. Here's a breakdown of the vegetation of the effects out there. You had about 35% of the fire was very high severity, 30% was a moderate severity, 27% low severity, and 8% was basically unchanged throughout the whole fire area. And I've got a good representation of some pictures of how that looks on the landscape. This is actually pictures of those fire severities as they're burning. So this is the kind of fire behavior you're going to see, which is going to cause those kind of effects. You've got the unchanged. Are you guys able to see that on your screens? Yes.
We have a question, please.
Okay, go ahead.
In determining severity, are you using on-the-ground surveys or are you using satellite images?
They start out using satellite imagery, and then they ground truth it. And they go out on the ground and they verify based on what they see from the satellite imagery, and then they verify that they have accurate information from the satellite.
Thank you.
So continuing, this is going to be the picture of what your fire behavior is going to cause those that kind of severity on the ground. Again, the unchanged, you got the low is just kind of a low, slow-moving ground fire, surface fire. Moderate is going to be a mixed severity, and then obviously the high is what often people are familiar with, is crowning trees, and which have a much higher impact. This is what it looks like in some of those areas after the fire has gone through, kind of a close-up of those vegetative severity levels. Again, the unchanged, the low, and the moderate, which is going to be more of a mixed severity throughout the fire area, all the way up to the high severity. Again, another picture of just what the park looks like. Being that we're just up in the hills from Reading, I know a lot of folks are probably going to be wondering what the park actually looks like when they come out this year. And so this is just a representation of some of the mixed severity with some high severity, mixed severity, and low severity throughout the park that you might be seeing if you go out into the park this summer. Another picture of just what the park is going to look like. And then this here is just a picture of the regeneration that's already happening out on the fire. This picture was actually taken just 6 weeks after the fire had passed through. And on the left side, there's some chink and pin that's already growing up, and then you have aspen regeneration. Basically, they're starting the successional process over, and the forest is starting to regenerate and regrow. And now I'm going to pass it back over to Darlene, and she's going to wrap it up with the tools and fire management.
Next, I'd like to touch base on is some of this, try to change it a little bit to some of the tools that we use here at the park to not only manage fuels but to manage fire across the landscape. The first thing I'd like to talk about is mechanical thinning. So we use basically 5 tools at the park to manage fuels. One of them is mechanical thinning. Many of you are familiar with mechanical thinning, and where will we use it in the park? Remember that 78% of the park is designated wilderness. So that kind of directs us as the tools that we can use on that landscape. But mechanical thinning, where we would use that is where we would use that in very heavy fuels, where we use it in undeveloped areas, where we have developed areas. And what we do using, the whole purpose or goal of mechanical thinning is those heavy fuels, we can't really allow a prescribed fire or a managed fire in there because the results would not be positive because the fuel loads are basically too heavy. So what we do with mechanical thinning, and we have a big project called the Northwest Gateway project coming up this fall, which is about 400 acres of mechanical thinning, and we're kind of jump-starting the system. Our whole goal here is to really create a natural fire regime for fire that when it comes through it, it's not a catastrophic, it's more that it does what it's supposed to do. So here we'll mechanical thin, and we're in areas that we can't, the fuel loads are too heavy, to jump-start it so we can then bring in prescribed fire or managed fire or a natural fire that might come through. Prescribed fire is another tool we use, and this is a fire where we light the fire. It's under really controlled conditions. It's in areas that we know that we're going to get a positive benefit from using this type of tool. So this area, we can use it in wilderness, non-wilderness. We can use it in developed areas. But you can pretty much know that you're going to get the resource benefits that you want.
Question,
Sure.
please.
What happens to the product generated from the mechanical thinning?
We do a thing called service contracts. So what that is that we negotiate with a logging company to what they'll do is they'll come in and we don't really charge them. They don't pay a fee to us. What they'll do is the money they make off it is the logs that they sell. So it's called a service contract type of thing. So that's how we work it in the Park Service.
I saw on the picture that you had some of the limbs on the ground. Is that an end product, or are they allowed to sell that, chip it, sell it for tonnage, and use it in cogeneration, or do you require they leave it on the ground?
I think it's a combination of both. You know, it's written within the contract. I think we allow both. Some of them, they can take the big logs to sell, and then we do let them pile it up, and they can take other things if they would need to do that. I think where it's important is a service contract, and we'll let them do everything. We won't chip and leave on the ground, basically, in a national park, but if they can make money off of it, part of the service contract, then it'll be included in it.
But you do leave the branch structure on the ground?
Yeah, what's left of it, correct, yeah. In a national park, that's what you do.
And the benefit would be?
The benefit would
be?
be?
The benefit to leaving the...
More of a slash type, we won't leave heavy slash because that's what we're trying to do, but you don't want to make it look so unnatural that it's not a national park. So we're going for, especially in a wilderness, well, we won't do mechanical thinning in wilderness, but our whole goal there is to make it look natural. We won't just clean it up completely. It's a little bit of a different mission that we have, and just maintaining it looking fairly natural. So it won't be like a landscaped area that you might see. Good questions, though. Prescribed fire, I just mentioned a little bit. There we can do within wilderness, outside of wilderness. You're really getting a huge amount of resource benefits there. And then manual thinning, we'll do manual thinning too. In those same areas that we talked about, mechanical thinning, as you can see, it's where the fuel loading is just so heavy that we really don't want to let natural fire, prescribed fire, or managed fire in there. And again, most of these areas we'll do a service contract, so we can make it beneficial for whoever's collecting the material that's left behind. Suppression, we do use suppression. We have suppression zones within the park that's identified. In our developed areas, we won't allow fire to be managed. We also have a suppression zone between the Forest Service and us on that boundary along there. So, and then the number of lightning strikes that we get each year, very few are managed. Most of them we do use suppression on. This here, I'd just like to mention this is kind of the fire history dating back a number of years that you can take a look here at prior fires throughout our landscape there. And as you can see, there's been fires across that landscape pretty consistently over time. And that will continue. Fire is not going to go away. But one of the positive things that you want to see when you look at a map like this, and what we were really interested in the reading fire, is when the fire was moving east, we knew that it would run into some of the prior older fires that we had, managed fires, prescribed fires, and wildland fires. And our expectations would be is that fire would drop down, go from a crown fire down to a ground fire. And so when it moved into these areas, that's what it did. It went from more of a large crown fire down to the ground. And that's the whole goal of trying to put fire across a mosaic on the landscape. So in closing, and then I'd really like to open it up to questions, and I think I'm preaching a little bit to the choir here, but fire is part of the landscape. It's not going away, as we're all aware of. We need to really restore fire as a natural process here. We need to maintain these healthy, functioning ecosystems. And, you know, our goal is basically to restore and maintain this landscape so fire is allowed to come across it. And I've heard other people talk today too. It's really going to take us all collaboratively to work together to manage these fuels across this landscape. It's a big challenge for all of us. But you know, Lassen Volcanic National Park has been part of this community and the communities surrounding the park for almost 100 years. In 2016, we'll celebrate our 100th anniversary. And so we look forward to working with all the communities for the next 100 years.
Supervisor Giacomini, followed by Supervisor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman Kehoe. Ms. Coons, thank you so much for the presentation. You know, this obviously was a catastrophe for our area. And I think you heard at the inquiry that the Congressman Herger held in Sacramento that there was highly impactful to a lot of businesses in the area. And so would you be willing to sit down and talk about, is there a process to recover any of those lost monies that those businesses suffered?
Two things I'd like to mention. One is that there is no mechanism based under federal fire policy for communities to receive funding back for their lost things. That's something that is totally, to be honest with you, out of my realm of things, but there is no process right now for people to do that. I think we talked about that this summer, but there is no process for that. The other thing too is we have in April, we're hosting 3 open houses. The first one is going to be in Reading at Turtle Bay on April 4th. And then we're going to have one in Bernie and one in Chester. And so we really want to invite, we'll put it out in press release, really invite the public to come and have those discussions with us. And I think in those discussions that we need to have with the community that I think is going to be really important. It is one of the things I do every time that Eric or somebody comes to me and says, you know, Darlene, this is a good opportunity to manage a fire. This lightning strike is an appropriate thing. The first thing I do is, okay, guys, what's going on in the communities? Is it 4th of July weekend? Is there a big event scheduled for Chester? Or is there anything going on in the park? So we really do pay attention to what's going on in the communities because we don't want to put smoke into a community on 4th of July. So I think at these open houses, I think our goal should be is to really sit down with communities and neighbors and small businesses and have those discussions to make sure that we know, you know, what times of the year and what works best.
Thank you. A little follow-up, if that's okay. Yeah, I appreciate. I think what we've heard that you've learned from it. I appreciate that very much. What I didn't hear is that maybe the timing was just really inappropriate to try to allow that fire to run and manage that fire as opposed to suppress it. I mean, I think everything that we've kind of talked about, those weather conditions in the middle of the summer, you know, you need to be managing those fires in a wetter season, not when it's that dry and hot. So I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more that weather discussion, you know, and that timing really is critical.
You know, let's talk about that, because the one thing that you'll find with me is I'm going to be honest and open up front with everybody. We might not always agree on all the things that we're doing, and people have asked me that. And I was here, and I've lived here long enough now to know the weather patterns, to have a good feel for it. The weather in July and where this fire started was totally appropriate to make that decision at that time. It was in open canopy, red fir, rocky area, and I had just hiked that area a couple weeks before. You know, it was just, that was it. The fire, and I think the other thing too, because I live in Red Bluff, and we put fire bans on in Red Bluff in June. But yet, we still have snow in the Sierras in July. So it's hard too, I think it's really kind of deceiving too for all of us that live down here, that the weather conditions up there in the Sierras are totally different. But what we did learn is, and I totally agree with this now that I think back about it, managing a fire like this sometimes goes on for 4, 6, 8 weeks. It could go on until the snow falls. And I think what we need to do a better job of, and I look back now, is the weather in July 23rd and the weather on August 1st was completely different. And the fuel moistures had really changed at that point. And that's where all of us decision makers need to be on top of things to understand that, okay, this is changing. Maybe we are getting out of where we want to be and it's going to behave differently. Maybe it's time to put it out. So I think that's, to be honest with you, that's what I learned out of listening to everybody.
Great, thank you very much. And I do live in Hat Creek, so I understand the high elevation
Yeah,
issues. Yeah,
right.
so that really different decision-making process, I guess, there. But anyway, thank you. I appreciate it. And the other point would be you talked about talking to the community. You really need to talk to the community sooner. And I think we've learned that.
Yeah, I agree.
Immediately as soon as you made the decision we're going to manage this fire, the community needed to know.
I agree,
Right.
totally.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Supervisor Baugh, followed by Supervisor Modi.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe. And Ms. Kunz, thank you once again for being here. I really do appreciate it. And also for the recognition that you said may possibly disagree. That's probably the statement of the decade. We will disagree. I have three questions. You mentioned a change in behavior, and Supervisor Giacomini was kind of directing her question in this regard. So I'll ask the question in a different way. Reading fire happens again. How would your assessment change, or would it change, based upon not the specific weather conditions that you incurred, but you said that you are looking to change behavior. So I take it that you've reassessed your policies. You mentioned last time you put a team together. You look at all of the challenges, the behaviors, the temperatures, the humidities, the whole bit, the community. How would you have judged this fire any differently now with your changed perspective?
I'm trying to run through all the things that are in that report. I would really encourage people to read that report. I mean, it's done really well. I think in all those areas we talked about, planning, fire behavior, communication, collaboration, I think there wasn't like one major thing, but there was a lot of little things that we do throughout the decision process or managing a fire that, for example, we need to use. There's a number of tools that are available to us that show fire modeling and fuel levels and moisture levels and all that and all those different things. There's a number of tools out there. And I think we need to make sure that we're using every tool to its fullest capability and making sure that those tools, that with the analysis that come out of those tools, are extremely integrated with the weather over time. So I think there is a number of things that we learned that are identified in this report that we will incorporate in the future in our planning and our decision making at all levels within the organization that are making decisions, from my office and my decisions down to the firefighters on the ground. Making those decisions and making sure we're using all those tools, making sure we're monitoring that fire really closely. One of the things that opened my eyes is that I'm really comfortable with the fact that when we're in planning level 2, which I think many of you are planning level 3, that tells us what the resources are available on a larger scale. I was always comfortable at planning level 3 that there was enough resources available. And I think what I've learned now at a planning level, to reverse it, I will ask more questions. At 2, I'm going to ask more questions when they come to me and say, hey, we've done the analysis, this is where it is, to make sure that there is enough resources available and what else is going on around us. So what the policy is sound, whether we agree or not. The tool is good. If we're ever going to make a dent in where we need to be, we need to use all the tools. And remember, I'm mostly wilderness. This park lesson's mostly wilderness. What all of you need to do, and the public is need us to hold us accountable to use all those lessons learned out of that reading fire, out of that review, whenever we make a decision in the future.
Well, here's the reason I asked that question, is that during your presentation to us, you did use the language, and buy a copy of the the DVD and play it back, but you use language that, as one of the outcomes, that you're going to modify, or I think you used the word change behaviors. And yet, during your answers to my question and to Ms. Giacomini's question, it pretty much sounds as if you would repeat the same exact scenario again, which your first statement gave me hope, and the second statement sounds like gobbledygook, typical government bureaucratic garbage. Honestly, it doesn't sound like you've learned a single lesson and that you're willing to even consider that any mistakes were made. Now, that's my humble opinion. Others can judge the way they want to, but I hear two different things coming out of the same mouth. But I'll move it on to the next question. You stated your number one priority is, I wrote it down, firefighter and public safety. And yet, how would you address the perspective from the public that your number one issue, your number one goal is to, and I'm going to add my own little words to this, let it burn under the guise of a natural lightning strike, because we can. That's how the public perceives this whole thing.
I think two things. One is we're at that point where, do we recognize that we have an issue with fuels across this landscape? Not just public lands, but, we had other fires like the Ponderosa that wasn't even on public lands. We have an issue with fuels across the landscape. I think the discussion we need to go, where we need to go is, yes, and all I can say to you is to say it once again, yes, we learned from this fire, and it will change our behavior in the future. I'll say that again. The second thing is that we need to focus on, okay, we have this landscape, we have the Sierras, we have these issues with fuels across it. What are we all going to do? And this is hopefully in the discussions we have in these open houses, okay, what are the tools we can use, where, when, how? Hear back from the public, hear back from the communities, okay, have this open dialogue, because if this was an easy topic and we all agreed, we would not be here. This is tough. I've lived in Montana, New Mexico, and now California. I've managed 3 parks with huge fire programs. Whether it's the Rockies or the Sierras, we still have these issues. So I can't tell you black and white, no, we're never going to use this tool, or we're just going to use suppression, because it's not going to get us where we want to go, and it's not my job. I'm going to be honest with you and try to answer your questions as best I can. Did we learn from this? Yes, we learned from this. I learned from this. All of the decision makers up and down the line learned from this and will change our behavior. Will there still be smoke in the sky in the summertime in the Sierras that'll impact communities? Yes. It might not be a fire that I'm managing. It might just be a wildland fire that comes through that we can't catch or suppress. I wish I had black and white answers. I don't.
Well, and I thank you for your transparency, and I will readily admit, from my perspective, we are going to have different perspectives regarding this. My last thought for you, and you don't need to respond to it, it's just an observation. You may respond if you want to, up to you. You mentioned work cooperatively. In my review of the fire, I believe that Caltrans notified you that things were out of control and that you pushed against Caltrans. Now, in my assessment, you have a different mandate. Your mandate is to kind of manage the park as a natural park, and it's kind of to let it burn, and CAL FIRE's mandate is to put it out. I would hope that if you learned anything, it would be from a fire suppression agency that is paid to put fires out, that when they say it's time to put this out, that it's time to put it out. That would be my number one goal for you in terms of change, and I appreciate your willingness to listen.
Thank you.
Supervisor Modi.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions, and thanks for coming today. I think you might have answered this before. I just want to just double check. Is there salvage allowed on the parkland after a fire?
No. You remember, we need to get back to this wilderness thing. Most of this fire was in the wilderness area. We had the bear and bark teams that we talked about come in and do an analysis of it. So we don't do salvage in a national park or in a wilderness area. Where we did do those service contracts is along the main park road where a lot of large timber came down, and we'll do it like mechanical thinning and stuff, but no, not in national park, and especially not in wilderness. Based on the wilderness law, we're not allowed to do that.
Okay. And the other thing I have, and you talked about several times about the fuel loading. You're right, it's everywhere, whether it be on the west side here or in the east. And you talked about a couple of ways, to deal with it, and also the concern you have with, obviously they didn't just burn. There are issues there, and I think you mentioned that most of the stuff you actually do suppression and put them out. But it sort of leaves what I see as the option to make it better without dealing with those two sides, and that's the mechanical thinning that you talked about. So my question is there funds available or more emphasis going to be put on in the future to try to do more mechanical thinning to reduce your fuel loads versus just going for the prescribed burn or something like that?
If you had asked me 10 years ago, if we would be doing mechanical thinning in parks, national parks, I would probably said, or even 15 years ago, I would have said no, because that was kind of the philosophy, not in a national park. I think that philosophy has totally changed. I think what you see is us using every tool, mechanical thinning, manual thinning, a lot more, and especially in those developed areas, but along those boundaries, if it's not wilderness. Yes, I think you'll see this use. I think you've seen a whole shift within just the National Park Service, based on our mission and what the lands are. But I think you've seen a whole shift. I think you're going to see a lot more service contracts, as long as we can make them economically viable for whoever's doing it. That's where our challenge is most of the time, because ours are smaller things. But yeah, I think you've seen where you've seen a whole shift in that. And just to jumpstart that system again and get those fuel down. There's some areas in the park that it just make me cringe because the fuel loads are just so high. Warner Valley's one of them.
So is it going to be more incumbent upon the private contractor to see value to his effort to do that versus any emphasis by the National Park Service to, put some money into that? I mean, it sounds like what you're telling me is you're going to put it out there for bid, I guess, so to speak, for the private contractor to decide if he can, make any money on it or not, and if not, it's not going to happen. And so does the Park Service not just do it on its own? I mean, put some money out there and just do it?
Do you mean, do we just go in and do we log it ourselves?
Yeah, would you just, pay someone to come in and just to do some mechanical thinning or, manual thinning? Or is it just a matter of more if someone's willing to take the risk of trying to make a buck on it and do it themselves?
I think right now we just use service contracts. We do
both service contracts.
And normal contracts?
Yeah, and normal contracts. It depends on the project. If it's a mechanical treatment project and they're pulling actually the logs out, then that's where the contractor gets the benefit from it. But we also have manual contracts where...
Excuse me, would you mind coming to the podium so the rest of the audience can hear your statement?
We actually have two types of projects. We have the manual thinning projects and mechanical thinning projects. The mechanical thinning projects are the projects where we'll actually cut larger diameter trees and where the contractors will make a profit off of that, and that helps offset the cost of the project. And then we also have the manual thinning projects are ones that will go out there with just crews with chainsaws, and they'll just do thinning, and then a lot of that will just pile up the slash, and then we'll go out there and we'll burn the slash later. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess my question is there going to be more emphasis on that in the future versus allowing just stuff to burn or, putting stuff out with suppression and hoping that, it just seems like it's the better alternative in the end if you can do more advanced thinning versus waiting for the fire. I recognize that sometimes, fire is probably the most cost-efficient way to do it in some ways, if it doesn't get out of control. But
we've got actually, like Darlene had mentioned, different areas in the park. We have some interface areas, we're more developed, and wilderness areas. So each tool we have is kind of catered for those different areas. And I'll let Darlene go ahead and continue.
Let's get, I think where we want to go with this discussion is that, and you guys have read about this in the newspapers, but overall, the fire management programs throughout the federal agencies are taking huge cuts. Over the next few years, 3 or 4 years, we're going to take a 30 to 40% cut in the staffing that we have. The next 5 to 10 years, it's going to change huge for all of us in the fire world because of the cuts that we're going to take within the fire programs and how we manage fires, because there's just not going to be the number of people out there to do that. So, where you're going with that, I think you described the details of us, but I think in the bigger picture is there's not going to be the funding for us to do this as often as we can, whether it's prescribed fire, managed fire, or mechanical thinning, just because of the huge cutbacks that we're taking. And isn't, yeah.
Well, then I guess my hope would be is that the Park Service and the federal government would promote more of trying to bring the private contractor in there and help them find a way to make it feasible financially and help them be kind of a win-win. You thin your forest a little bit, and they make a little bit of a living off it. And hopefully the Park Service, I don't know, it's beyond your level, but they will maybe take a more positive, proactive stance to do more of that. So,
okay.
thank
you.
Supervisor Chappelle.
Thank you, Chairman Keel. I just have a couple questions. One, I have seen that slash, and I kind of take a little bit of exception that it doesn't look natural, and I've had a lot of complaints about people talking about it, and it seems to me that it ends up being somewhat of a fire hazard in itself as it dries out and it adds fuel to more fires. What's your feeling on that?
What I'd like to do is that we're going to do this mechanical thinning project in September here, a pretty large project there. And I want to invite everybody, and we'll let you know. But we'll try to host some tours and stuff like that so you can see on the ground what's left behind and what's not. Because there's not a lot left behind. Most of it's piled. If they can't use it and take it off, it's part of the contract. Sometimes we'll go back in and do pile burning, which all of you are very familiar with. So I think if you come out there and see it on the landscape, you'll have a better feel for, and have that discussions with it, whether you think it looks natural or not, and see where we go from there.
Also, in the wilderness areas, I just see that so counterproductive. I mean, it's my own personal opinion, but it doesn't seem to me that they're servicing anything. The studies that I've read, the animals don't like them. They don't let the people participate in the forest, which that's supposed to be the people's land to be able to participate. And they add a total unmanageable fuel condition for fires. I mean, I don't know how you guys can even put those fires out because they're all overgrown. And that fuel that's in there is just unmanageable. So, I mean, I know there's no question for this because that's been all mandated by the federal government and so forth, but that seems to me that those areas are just totally counterproductive. But this is probably a silly question, but a long time ago, the Indians used to burn the forest in the wintertime. And I realize now we've got so much overgrowth in the forest that burning the forest at any time is a dangerous condition because of fire, because our fuels now, I mean, I moved up to Lakehead in '78, and our fuels have gone from 3 and 4 feet tall to 15, 16, 17 feet tall. And so trying to burn those fuels is going to set a forest fire off. So I realize that that area can't happen anymore, and it's probably got fund restrictions and everything else imposed on it, but it's just we have got the fuels are built up so bad that I don't know exactly how you can manage fires when they kick off. You've got the underground, and you've got levels that just keep burning, and pretty soon the trees get hot enough where they just start exploding, and you got a major fire going. And I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's any plans to try to start thinning those forests out. What I've studied with forests is that the thinner they are, the more productive the trees are, the bigger they grow, the more productive the forest is, and the animals like that a lot better than they do with all this underbrush and growth. So, I mean, I don't know if there's, you said that there is an avenue of change at this point, or in philosophy. But at this point, it's kind of like the old car that needed 1 repair, then now it needs 2, now it needs 10, now it's got to go to the junkyard. And we've let the Forest Service we let the forest get in that condition, and now it's become to me, it's a problem. I mean, I don't know, in my mind, and I'm not an expert, okay, but I don't know exactly, unless you guys start running, big DH through there and stuff and start cleaning everything out to get it all down and then try to clean it up, which is going to be a really expensive project. I mean, I don't know how you're going to do it, so I'm just kind of curious what your guys' plans are moving forward with all that, because it's actually, I mean, if you drive down Lakeshore Drive and up in Lakehead, it looks like a jungle, and it's never, and I've noticed it over the years, this stuff is just starting to grow right over the roads, and when you look back inside and you see all the underbrush and then everything else that's growing, and there's stuff growing in there I don't recognize anymore, okay, but this stuff is getting 16, 17, like I said, 18 feet tall. Anyway, I was just wondering if there's if anybody's trying to address that, and like I said, to me, it's gonna be a problem.
I think, well, basically, you've kind of re-supported what I'm saying. We're not saying much difference. Yeah, there is, the fuel loads are huge out there. We've suppressed fire for 100 years. And I think all of us just need to continue to have these discussions on all the tools that we can possibly come up with to manage those fuels, because fire is here. It's part of this landscape. Whether I'm sitting here or you're sitting there, fire is going to come through here, and it's going to have a variety of impacts based on those fuel loads. I would totally agree with you there. And it's going to continue us having these dialogues and, talking about the tools that we use and what's new or possibly out there, or where we can go with the funding we have. I totally agree.
Thank you.
Ms. Kuntz, thank you for your presentation this morning. I have a couple of questions and an observation. First question is, talk to us this morning about the totality and value of the resource damage as a consequence of the fire.
What Eric did, I think he presented it, fairly overall picture of what we saw. He gave you the percentages where we had high severity, moderate severity, low severity, and unchanged. So when I flew the fire probably early August, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see that mosaic out there. You're going to see that mosaic on the ground of, totally burned up trees to very little impacts to it to in between. So that's what you're going to see. That's basically what happened, and he showed you those percentages as to what it looks like on the vegetation. So is that the question?
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
I'm asking, what is the value of the resource damages? For example,
Okay.
how many merchantable trees were destroyed?
We didn't calculate merchantable trees
Did
that
not.
were destroyed.
Okay.
No, we didn't.
Do you believe that some of those trees were destroyed?
Oh, yes.
Okay. What are your plans about those trees? And this is a follow-up question to Mr. Supervisor Modi. What do you intend to do about those trees?
Most of this burned in wilderness. Okay, and so when the bear and bar teams came in and we looked at, did we need to do anything really quickly for watersheds or that was going to hurt water systems or something like that? What we found is that we needed to do very little in that sense, culvert works and stuff. Because it's wilderness and wilderness has its values, we will basically clear the trails through that area. We will let the trees fall down and basically do very little on the landscape.
Let's talk about the trees that were destroyed in the non-wilderness area. What do you plan on doing about those?
Oh, so much of this fire was in the wilderness area. The areas that it wasn't, like along the road, mainly is where you're talking about non-wilderness, is along the main park road, because the main park road is not, it was outside the wilderness. There's a corridor there. So what we did is in that section in there, and we already did it, is we had a group come in and remove those logs that they cut down along there during the fire. So that's already been done this past winter. So basically, we cleaned up that area along there in the non-wilderness.
Those were the trees that were felled as a consequence of fire suppression activity. Are there other trees that were not felled, that are standing, that are dead? How are you going to handle those trees?
We'll just leave them be. We'll monitor them, and if they fall down, make sure they're not any hazard, but we'll just leave them.
You'll leave them?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I will tell you, to most people, that appears to be wasteful. And I know it's consistent with your national policy,
Right.
but it does appear to be wasteful. And that doesn't necessarily require a response from you. Let me make my observation. During the course of your presentation, and personally I find this very unique and very refreshing that you said this. You said, you need to hold us accountable. That was an invitation to county government to provide oversight to federal activities. And I'm not sure the federal government looks at it from that perspective. But let me assure you that we will take you up on your offer and hold you accountable and perhaps convene a little ad hoc group to see how we can do that. So we thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
We thank you for the uniqueness of your presentation. Further questions? Supervisor Chappelle?
One, and I don't want to beat the dead horse here, but the trees, like Chairman Keogh expressed, they look like they would be a resource that could be usable and that somebody could market them and make some money off of and clean the forest stuff up. They're very unsightly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that they're very acceptable to bugs because they're dead. Those bugs germinate in there in those trees, and then they go to good, healthy trees. And so then you have something that's going on that's actually increasing the chance of the healthy trees to have bugs in them. And what's your feeling on that?
You know, this country, we have an extraordinary public lands. We have Forest Service, we have Fish and Wildlife, we have national parks. And they all have a different mission. And it's something that goes through a huge public process. People value having their parks, their forests, their wildlife areas. They build their homes next to it. There's different missions for each one that's been established for 100 years with the National Park Service. So I guess we've got apples and oranges. You're saying that we need to cut and log within a national park. No place, and should we, does it allow for us or encourage us or be part of my job to log in a national park? It's not the mission. Our mission is to preserve and protect and provide for the visitor experience. Each one of the agencies has a different mission that creates this landscape throughout this country. So you can keep asking me over and over again about logging in a national park and the 397 different areas we have, the 50 national parks. Our answer isn't going to change because it creates that mosaic across this country. And so my answer is the same, and I'm not trying to be, yes, you can look at it as value, but also you can look at it as a person that hikes through there, that the value is different. So.
Yeah, I just have to comment on that is that the aesthetic appeal may have people that don't want to come to the national parks if that's all they're going to see is burnt trees.
Possibly so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. You appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Our next presentation, ladies and gentlemen, is a presentation from the U.S. Forest Service Shasta Trinity National Recreation Area District Ranger Christy Cartini on an updated travel management plan maps. Ms. Cartini, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Will you also give us an invitation to conduct oversight activities of the Forest Service?
So, my name is Christy Catini. I'm the District Ranger for the National Recreation Area Management Unit on the Shasta Trinity National Forest, and I'm happy to be here today. So, thank you. I have actually two short topics today that I'm going to touch on. So, the first one is, you might remember back in March of 2010, the Forest Supervisor made a decision implementing the travel management rule on the forest, which identified over 5,000 miles of open roads and trails on the forest. The maps that identify those roads are going to be released to the public later this week, and we wanted you to have advance copies. So I have those for all of you.
I might add parenthetically that this presentation this morning is brought to us courtesy of Supervisor Chappelle, and we thank you for doing that. Thank you.
The maps reflect changes that have been made by other project decisions over the last year or so, which includes the 100 miles of mixed use that has been added by the Shasta Trinity OHV Enhancement Project. And although we've spent numerous hours researching titles and trying to validate jurisdictions and easements and so on, over the 2.1 million acres of the Shasta Trinity, there's no doubt still room for improvement on these maps. So we are implementing a comment card, public response option. There'll be a website where folks can let us know if they find errors on the map. or however else these maps can be improved. And these maps will be published annually. So we'll review and validate all the comments that we get, and where appropriate, we will make changes to the next map that will be issued about a year from now. We also recognize the use of these motor vehicle maps is going to be new to most users of the forest, so we're creating some easy-to-use tools that will accompany the maps, that will kind of tie the maps together. And we also have made agreements with law enforcement to take an educate and inform approach for the first year of implementation, although they will continue to take appropriate action if they observe intentional resource damage, as always. So it's a 6-package that covers the forest, 6-map package. You have that package, and these maps will be provided free to the public. So if there's no questions on that, I'll move to my second topic. So the second topic is just to give you a quick update on the post-Bagley fire activity. So you might remember that on August 18th last year, the Bagley fire was started by lightning and was contained on September 15th. That fire ultimately burned about 46,000 acres in Shasta County, both public and private lands. Immediately after the fire, actually before the fire was even contained, we started stage 1 and stage 2 suppression repair actions. Those actions are all completed. That includes things like water bars, seeding the fire lines, pulling material back over the dozer lines, removing landing pads, and those kinds of things. Subsequently, there's a burned area emergency response, or we call it BEAR, evaluation, and that work is still ongoing. So that work includes things like signing for warnings and road closures, ongoing surveys and monitoring, and grading roads. In this case, it also included debris catchment devices. So we anticipated a fair amount of debris coming down the hill and down the rivers into Shasta Lake, and have installed catchment devices, or booms, at the mouths of both the McLeod and the Squaw arms of the lake. To date, those booms have collected what we're estimating to be around 400 to 800 tons of debris that we have managed to keep from going into Shasta Lake. The challenge is still to basically purse that debris up and move it to an area where the water will drop out from under it, and then we'll have a disposal process that will happen later this year. There's also a significant amount of road damage in that area. Most of that damage was caused by the early storms that we had earlier in the year. Some of it was probably because of the fire. Some of it probably would have happened anyway. We were able to do almost all the inventories, but did not get all of that road repair completed before it snowed. So we're seeking funding for that, and we'll get back in there as soon as we can and work on that. The forest also, probably within the next week or so, will be sending out public scoping letters for a project in that area to remove hazard trees along the roads and in developed sites. And that project will also evaluate the potential of putting those trees up for commercial salvage. So you'll probably get that letter in the mail within the week. And that's the conclusion, unless you have questions.
Questions? Supervisor Chappelle.
Thank you, Chairman Kehoe. Christy, does this map include the rural roads also that you guys are actually permitting and actually reducing some of the traffic that used to be on them?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, I mean, just the roads that are now been tagged with special permit use. I know I've seen some of them with green signs that say G6 or something like that, which I don't have.
Yeah, those are system roads, And so anything with a sign, so thank you for asking that question. The routes, the authorized routes and the routes on that map are signed. So they should be obvious to the public.
Does that mean that's an authorized route then?
Yes.
Those routes are?
Yes.
Okay, so is there a way that the public can understand what is and what isn't authorized? 'Cause
We're hoping that these maps will help. It will be one of the tools that I mentioned that we're going to have to go with the map. We think will help that. It also is going to help to have a companion map or a forest map with you, because this map does have gaps in some places because we can't show where the roads cross private land, for example. So in some ways it may look odd from that perspective. So if you have another map with you or one of these tools that we will be producing, it will be more obvious. But they will be signed.
All right, thank you. And then also, I was just wondering, I know there's been a lot of public outcry, and a lot of the public don't really understand what's happening to the rural roads, but a lot of them are being closed, and the only way somebody ever finds out about us if they're hunters or something like that, or just off-road users. And so is the Forest Service still trying to close a lot of the remote roads, or has that philosophy changed at all?
I don't know that it's changed. I think there are some cases where roads we're looking at decommissioning roads through a planning process that the public will have input into. But in terms of this decision and this particular thing that I'm talking about here today, that there's no additional roads that were actually closed. There's unauthorized routes that the public will no longer be able to use because they aren't on the map.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation, and thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Just to Supervisor Chappelle's point, I think, and of course, he wasn't on the board here last year, but there was a discussion about closing, the level 3 roads, and we had quite a long discussion with the Forest Service, and in the end, about 95% of those roads stayed open. So I don't know if you're referring to those roads or maybe some other lower level roads, but just.
I'm just referring to a lot of the rural roads that are being closed, and there's a lot of opposition. I shouldn't say a lot of opposition because there's not a lot of people to use them unless you're a hunter or somebody that likes to go off road and kind of travel those roads. So there's been a lot of opposition to the roads that are being closed, and some of them feel that they're being restrictive and some of the rights are being taken away.
I'm not aware of any rural roads that are being closed other than, like you mentioned, unauthorized roads where people just made their own roads and
Right.
stuff.
And then the other confusing thing is that when you pull up on a road that you've traveled for several years and all of a sudden you see a sign, you don't know whether that's something you're going to get cited on or not right now. And that's one of the reasons why I asked her that question, because the signing itself has a tendency, because it's a sign and it wasn't there before, it has a tendency to make people think that, well, I can't travel this road anymore.
Mr. Lees, perhaps you could arrange for Mr. Minturn to give Supervisor Chappelle and Supervisor Giacomini a briefing session on what we have accomplished during the last term. I have a question relative to the Bagley fire, and it's tantamount to what I asked the previous speaker. Tell us what you intend to do about the fire kill of merchantable trees.
Well, our first effort and our first concern is the safety to the public and the roads. And so that's why our first crack at this was to deal with the hazard trees along the roads and evaluate the potential opportunity to salvage those. The area, the Bagley area, it's not wilderness, but it provides other challenges. It's extremely steep country. It also happens, almost the whole fire area is in inventoried roadless area. It's in late successional reserve. It's a critical habitat for the spotted owl. There's lots of challenges. So where we would actually be able to access other potential salvage projects is pretty limited. We will be doing probably subsequent planning. Later this year, we'll initiate another planning effort that will be looking at fuel reduction and reforestation efforts. So you'll be hearing more from us on those later.
Let me summarize then. Where it's practical, you will harvest the trees.
We're looking at those options, yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Anything-
and unlike the other, unlike the previous presentation, only about 11% of the Bagley fire was high severity. So not much of the fire area was on more the low to moderate end of the scale.
Good, thank you. Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Gattini.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Item R5 is to receive an update from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Northern Region Wildlife Program Manager Karen Kovacs on gray wolves in Northern California, and this is brought to us courtesy of Supervisor Baugh. Thank you, Supervisor Baugh, and good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Keough, members of the board, county staff, members in the audience. Thank you for having me. My name is Karen Kovacs, as you mentioned. I am with the newly named California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I don't know if I've yet gotten used to saying that. I'm here today to give you an update, but I also wanted to give you a quick introduction of a couple of other folks that I brought here as well. One, I'd like to introduce you to a member of my staff, Pete Figuera. Many of you may already know him. Pete, if you could just...
Good morning.
Pete's our field person here for Shasta County and has actually led some of our investigations relative to gray wolves in California. Also, we have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Rep. Sarah Swente. Sarah will be providing you a very quick update on the status review for gray wolves.
Excellent.
Okay, so to begin with, let me give you a quick review. Mid-1990s, after much planning, public meetings, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service received authorization to begin implementation of the wolf recovery program in the greater Yellowstone area in Idaho. That involved reintroduction efforts, which we now know were hugely successful. Gray wolves have expanded to the west, including Oregon, including Washington. Our counterparts in the state of Oregon, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, developed a state management plan, which included a collaring effort on at least one individual per pack of wolves in their state. Those collars have a dual purpose in that they have a GPS capability as well as a VHF frequency. It's because of that, our friends in Oregon, they informed our agency that there was a wolf traveling southward through Oregon. We now know that is OR7. But also at the same time, the department, realizing the success of the wolf recovery effort in the West, and you know, we weren't really thinking to be anytime soon, but we started to do some background data gathering on what do we know about wolves in California. As you know, we haven't had wolves in this state in almost 100 years. We're new to this. And so we were very actively trying to gather as much information as we could about the prevalence, the presence of wolves in California, as well as trying to learn from some of our other counterparts or other states. We looked at their plans, the federal plans, and we also had developed a framework of what would we put on our website to inform the public. Then, of course, on December 28, 2011, OR7 entered California. You recall that we met with you around this time last year, as well as other boards of supervisors in the northern part of the state. What we wanted to do is to provide you the information as we knew it at that time, what we knew about gray wolves in California, what we knew about this particular animal, and to be available to answer those kinds of questions. We indicated that we would convene a stakeholder group meeting later in the year that included several interested parties based in part of what had transpired in other states. While you were talking about fire earlier, understand that's controversial. Wolves are not fire, but also an equally lightning rod for controversy. So controversy has followed the wolves as it has continued to expand west. Some of the main groups that we solicited to participate in a stakeholder group included hunting organizations, conservation and environmental groups, and of course the agricultural interests. You may also recall last year after I did a quick presentation to your board, we met with some local ag interests separately afterwards. So where are we a year from now? Or a year. OR7 has traveled well over 2,000 miles in this state. We're only connecting the dots, so his actual mileage is probably far greater than that. We know that he's traveled in Siskiyou, Modoc, Lassen, Shasta, Plumas, Butte, and Tehama counties. You recall last year at this time, OR7 had traveled through Shasta County January, February of 2012. He did make a brief visit this year in very early January into Shasta County. Presently, as of this morning, he's in northwestern Lassen County. I should say back in northwestern Lassen County. What have we learned? We know that this animal is capable of moving 30 miles in a day. His movements have also been very localized, where he's traveled less than a few hundred yards in a day. We've placed a number of trail cameras throughout the northern part of the state in Shasta, Siskiyou, and Plumas counties in areas where he has concentrated his locations. To date, we've been unsuccessful in gathering any additional pictures other than the one that we have published of R7 in California. We have a good sense of what he's eaten while he's been here, which has been principally deer. We found his scat. We found what remains of what we believed he's eating, that is principally deer hair, bone fragments. We've also found his tracks. He has traveled in every single habitat type in the northeastern part of this state. Coniferous forest, oak woodlands, Great Basin habitats, he's been in all of those. And it just lends to the general belief about gray wolves is that they are habitat generalists. He's also been on both public and private lands. We know of no confirmed depredation. We know of no other wolves. And believe me, I have received tons of emails, lots of images. We know of no other confirmed wolf presence in California to date. I should say wild wolves. The other thing that we've learned from this is that you may recall I talked about wolf-dog hybrids. I think the prevalence of wolf-dog hybrids in California is far greater than what we had originally thought. We did convene our first wolf stakeholder meeting last April. In fact, your own Mary Pfeiffer, the Shasta County Ag Commissioner, is a member of that committee, or that group. The summary of that meeting is on the department's website. And I think overall what we took away from that is the stakeholders wanted us to use the best available science in development of a plan for wolves in California. Our second stakeholder meeting was this past February, early February. We presented to the group what we thought the plan, what an outline of that plan would actually look like. I hope to have the summary of that report on our website as early as next week. Our third meeting is scheduled for the end of this month, and it'll actually be in the Reading area. And I should say, just so that you're aware, that it does include a number of local entities. We've got Mary. I understand Mary may be moving on, I'm not sure, but we've got a representative from Tehama County who will be sitting in. We've got representatives from Modoc County as well as Siskiyou County. Every agency, state agency, is suffering from not enough funds. The department was successful in securing some federal dollars to assist us in the development of this wolf plan. Right now, we have a sense of what it might look like, but we are collaborating. Collaboration seems to be a very strong word today. Collaborating with our stakeholder group to give us guidance, support, assist us in development of what that plan will actually look like. To give you some sense of how long this may take, the two recent plans, the wolf management plans that have been developed for the two Pacific states, that would be Oregon and Washington. Oregon's, again, they had a stakeholder group. That one took 2 years. Washington, which is the most recent one, took 4. So we've started down that road. There's also a number of other plans that we have on our website of if you're interested or members of the public are interested. For example, there's the Federal State Coordination Plan. You all recall that the gray wolf is still federally listed as endangered in California. And so what is the response going to be between the state and federal agencies? That would be namely Fish and Wildlife Service as well as Wildlife Services in the event of some kind of conflict with gray wolves and livestock, public safety, etc. Now, what's also transpired is you may recall that our State Fish and Game Commission was petitioned to list gray wolves in California. Currently, under our authority, they are listed as a non-game species. So a group submitted the petition to list them as state endangered. The Fish and Game Commission accepted that petition. You should know that the bar for submitting a petition and what meets the legal standard is pretty low. However, you may also recall that legal counsel advised the commission staff that this is new ground from the standpoint of we know of one animal. The State Endangered Species Act looks at the conservation of populations, and to date what we are aware of is we have a population of one animal. So new ground. The commission, probably September, October, well, let me back up a little bit. So once they accepted that petition, this starts the whole time clock for the state's review. There's a 12-month status review of that. I do believe I submitted to your county clerk a copy of the public notice that the department has released asking for any and all available scientific information folks have here in California as part of our status review on a report back to the commission. The commission is likely to hear this again in the late fall, early winter. We figure probably September, October, and I'll certainly keep you apprised of that if you desire. So information from the public or anyone else is due to the department by May 6th. I'll be available to answer questions, but I wanted to give Sarah an opportunity to give you a brief update on the federal status review process.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting us to meet with you today. My name is Sarah Swente. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of the Sacramento Ecological Services Office. And Karen asked me to talk about the federal listing process, the status of the review that we're in, also what would be the opportunity for public participation in that process, and the time frame for completion just of the review that we're in. So just to recap, last year in late February, the service announced its results of a 5-year review on the species, the gray wolves in the lower 48 states. A 5-year review is something that every endangered species that's on the list, whether it's threatened or endangered, goes through every 5 years to see whether they're, what the status of the species is. Is it improving? Is it not improving? Is it going down? And then recommendations for whether to uplist, no recommendation for change, or delist are made in that process. And then it starts a further review process if there is a recommendation for change. So the 5-year review was completed, and it was recommended that the gray wolf, as it's currently described on the endangered species list, be revised if appropriate. So any revision will reflect the current distribution and status of wolves in the lower 48 states and Mexico. It would only include areas where there's a valid species, subspecies, or distinct population that meets the definition of threatened and endangered. The status review for those gray wolves is currently ongoing. So, and that includes the wolves in this area, or north and west. The outcomes of this review will identify which, if any, of the gray wolves should continue to receive protections under the Endangered Species Act. Because we are still in the process of identifying which of those subspecies or populations may continue to still warrant protections, we recommended no changes at this time for listing. So we recommended the listing as it is stay intact. So then, as far as public participation, after the review is complete, and it would then start the process for either uplisting, delisting, or no change. If there is a recommended change, that is when public participation would be asked for. We would open a public comment period for each stage in the process. We do not currently have a time frame that I can give you for completion of this review, but we are working on it and hope to get it out by the end of this fiscal year, which would end at September. Because this issue is so much bigger than California, our headquarters office in Washington, D.C. is working on it. So that's pretty much the information I have for you today, and I'll help Karen answer questions if you need.
Thank you. Concluding remarks, please.
Oh, well, I'm certainly available if you have any
All right.
questions.
Supervisor Baugh.
Thank you for taking the time to come and update the public and the board as well. Just one question from me. Is it your plan or your goal to establish a PAC in California?
Let me see if I can answer that question. We are challenged, if you will. Once this animal entered California, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is now challenged with exercising its trustee authority over that resource. Because of the huge controversy of gray wolves, because of the likelihood of additional wolves to possibly come into California, it was felt, based on input from the public, that we should move forward in development of a plan. At this point, what that plan will entail, I can't say. Whether or not it is state listed, I can't say. There's so many different scenarios that are likely. Does it stay federally listed? Do the feds delist? Do we list? Do we not list? It's very difficult at this time to actually answer that question for you. I think it is reasonable, though, to expect additional animals to come into California. How soon that would be, I can't say. To give you a little bit of perspective, last year at this time, Oregon had 4 packs and about a couple of dozen wolves. My understanding is, as of today, they have 6 packs and probably 43 wolves. Wolves, wolf recovery has been very successful. I think it's only a matter of time. Again, I can't give you that, what that time will be before additional animals enter California. What that's going to look like for California, how we manage in California, at this point it's too early in the process to say.
I guess if I could interpret your answer, I would say you have just said yes via the plan existence itself, and we are government, and that's what happens. You establish a plan, and that plan becomes a reality. So I may ask that question, and so I wanted to try to get a very frank answer. And
okay, maybe I didn't understand your question exactly.
The feeling from the public is that the plan itself will facilitate the establishment of PACs in California.
The plan will facilitate the establishment of PACs. I think wolves are going to...
Well, I know the wolves have a mind of their own.
Sure.
And yet the plan itself will more than likely pave the way for that to move forward.
You mean pave the way for tolerance of wolves in California?
Tolerance, legalities, direction from departments, federal, state.
I think that would be a very fair assessment. I do want to reiterate, neither the California Department of Fish and Wildlife or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have any plans to bring wolves into California, whether from other states or from Canada. That's not something that's on the table right now. So if animals come in, they're dispersing on their own.
Would appreciate any advance notice you can give of meetings so that we can share them with the folks in Shasta County.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, when the Fish and Game Commission meets again to hear about the petition listing, I'll certainly let the board know.
Thank you.
Yes.
Supervisor Chappelle.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe. You know, you did answer one of the questions because I was kind of curious, since this one wolf, this OS7, is that right? OR7 is currently the only wolf in California, right?
You're correct.
Somebody had brought to my attention a while back that there was a lot of wolves and the population was increasing really greatly, and I talked to one of my friends about it, and he thought I was crazy because he said we only have the one wolf in California. So then I went back on the internet and checked everything out, and yeah, okay, we found that out. So you said that there are packs, though, in Oregon, so is that a possibility that they could migrate, I guess, into California? That might be a concern.
Well, if you look at how OR7 arrived in California, this is well, at that time was a young wolf doing what wolves do. Young animals disperse for a number of reasons. One is to form their own pack. If you think about pack structure, these animals are highly social, but typically it's only the dominant pair, the alpha pair, that reproduces. If you're a young wolf and you want to pass on your DNA, the only way that's going to happen is if you join another pack, become a dominant member of the alpha pair, you form your own pack. So dispersing animals is a very common activity for young wolves. It's likely going to continue to happen in Oregon as their wolf population continues to expand. So the expectation is there likely could be additional dispersing animals throughout Oregon and possibly into California.
Okay, so is there a stigma that they think that the gray wolf can really become dangerous? Because I'm just wondering what that might be compared to like the mountain lion.
Dangerous to, if you look at the literature, the scientific literature, what's been published about public safety, interactions between humans and gray wolves. Gray wolves have existed on the landscape for tens of thousands of years, and yet the confirmation of fatalities is pretty scant, particularly in North America. We have one known fatality in Alaska and a second one in British Columbia, which may have been grizzly bear, may have been wolf, but it's unconfirmed. So that's two, where you have thousands of gray wolves out there and lots of people. So on face, if you look at incidents between mountain lions and people and gray wolves and people, the potential is always there. But here in California, we don't have anything to compare that to. All I can tell you is the literature shows that conflicts, fatalities, attacks between humans and gray wolves is pretty rare.
Okay, yeah, the reason I asked that question because I'm aware of mountain lion attacks, okay, and gray wolves, I've never heard much about it, so I'm just wondering what the concern is there, you know, why we're spending a lot of money studying the gray wolf when it seems like at this point it's kind of premature.
A bit, and the evidence doesn't support that as being a huge risk. I'm not going to say that there is no risk, but the risk is probably much less.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for
You're
your
welcome.
attendance. Appreciate it.
You bet.